Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everybody. My name is miahtheking, and I know a lot of jokes about retired people, but none of them work. Now then, today we're taking a look at a game that just released this evening on Steam called Dustfleet, and if you hear any whining in the background, I apologize. That's my dog being a pain because she's always got to be a pain whenever I record. Anyway, this game was developed by Orbiting Disco and published by Freedom Games, selling for $20 American and released not in early access. So, what is there to say about this game? Well, it's a 4X strategy game in space. There's no real story here. I mean, there is, but it's kind of generic. Oh no, raiders, go get them. And then you start pulling on this thread to discover why, how, when, and where. It's generic and kind of boring, to be brutally honest, but also I wasn't exactly looking for deep story here either, and the fact that it does have a main campaign is appreciated, so whatever. Anyway, if I had to compare this game to another, it's a lot like Homeworld 2. You guys remember that game? It's an old game. It's this game right here. Yeah, now that was an awesome game. And in some ways, this game is a lot like that, but instead of being focused on real-time strategy and building stuff like Age of Empires or whatever, it focuses more on a 4X style of strategy, way zoomed out with an overmap. So, as always, let's go into the good and the bad, followed by my final thoughts, alright? Okay, so, up first for the positives is the look of the game, the graphics. Despite the overview map looking a little bland and boring, the color contrast and attention to detail in the models is very nice. The lighting and bloom effects look really nice as well, and everything here seems to complement each other. I think the best part is the laser gun colors. I mean, when you're watching ships duke it out in space, you want to see all the pretty colors flying at each other, and they do a really good job of that here. Don't get me wrong, it's not the best graphics I've ever seen, but it's still not bad to look at on average. Next up is the music and the added benefit of the voice acting. They use a radio frequency kind of style for their voice acting, which makes it seem more realistic and enjoyable. Plus, there's a lot of voice acting here, which is appreciated and shows some real effort. But the music was very enjoyable to listen to. The only issue I had with when it came to the music was that it could be a bit too loud sometimes. But, you know, I was able to correct that in the settings. But overall, I just enjoyed listening to the game. As for the sound effects, well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go into that later in the negatives. But everything else sounded really nice. Next up is the price tag. Considering all that's here in this game, and the voice acting, and the length of playtime, and ability to replay, and customizing random map matches, you know, you can create and customize a randomly generated match whenever you want to play, you know, so that gives the replayability some, you know, leeway. I think that price tag is very appropriate. Any more than $20 and I probably would have been a little bit more frustrated, but I think they found a very solid balance here with this price tag. Next up for the positives is going to combine the stability and the tutorial. So that tutorial was super awesome. It's short, it's sweet, it gets to the point, it's nicely worded, overall just nice and speedy while also showing and telling you how and what to do exactly when you want and need to know it. I learned how to play the game very fast with almost no frustration or confusion. A very well done practical tutorial. As for the stability, the game was running fast and smooth and I didn't encounter a single bug or glitch while I was playing it. So it's a perfectly stable game. You know, at least for me it was. I did have a little bit of issue with the AI, either not listening to my orders or having to tell them to do something multiple times, but I feel like that's kind of a minor thing that could easily be fixed with a patch, so I didn't really make too much of a mention of it here. Alright, so that's all I got for the pros. Now I gotta go on to the cons. But before that, I could really use some help here, everybody. Everybody who watches this, please hear me out. My channel just simply isn't growing fast enough. And YouTube is kind of against supporting smaller channels. They take our videos and they hide them away in the annals of YouTube where they'll never be seen by anybody because we're so small. So the only way that my channel will grow and get more public appearance is if my fans and viewers out there help spread the word of my channel and show it some support. Like, comment, subscribe, but most of all, get the word out. It would really help me grow and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Now then, on to the negatives. The first negative is the sound effects. Now with the user interface sound effects, it's not bad. Little bleeps and bloops like you'd expect, but some of the sound effects just don't sound right. I zoomed into a battle to listen to the awesome fighting sound effects that I was expecting and I was a little disappointed.
Go ahead.
Now don't get me wrong, they're not awful or anything, but considering how everything else was presented, like the music and the awesome color and bloom effects, I was just expecting more showy, you know, explosive sound effects for the lasers and guns, but it just wasn't all there for me. The next negative I have is the gameplay. Now hear me out, it's not that bad, but I still wanted to make mention of it. For the most part, I was kind of bored. Now, maybe it was just the tutorial that I was playing, but I started playing the main story campaign, and again, I was still kind of bored. I mean, you look at this large map with nothing going on in it, and then you build a space station on these points, which you can't really inspect or get a good look at. You build upgrades to it, which provide various bonuses, but again, you can't really see how cool it is. and then you continue to stare at this boring overmap, clicking next turn over and over until the stuff that you chose to build is built. You know, you move your fleets from sector to sector, point to point, you'll have a small battle, build a space station, rinse and repeat. They're lucky that the space battles are actually kind of fun, because the problem here that I'm having is I'm worried that the battles themselves will get stale over time with being just the same basic thing over and over again. I mean, I was expecting a lot more from this game. The combat is pretty fun for the most part. Like, for instance, you can summon in bombers from a nearby space station you built, and they'll warp in, bomb something, and then warp out. They'll get out of there. That's really cool. They even have a little tiny cutscene at the bottom left, like in a little camera, you know, screen that you can see the bombers coming in and doing their job. Like, that's really cool. I love that kind of stuff. You can build carriers and fighters or bombers from the carriers and then launch them out to target enemy turrets so that they're unable to shoot at you from their ships. Like, that's really freaking cool. You can call in mining vessels to mine asteroids while you're fighting so that you can have new ships built and warp in to reinforce your current ships. So the combat is probably the most fun part of the game, and it's really interesting and innovative. It even has vertical height in its gameplay maneuvers, you know, giving you a whole new dimension to the combat. It's everything outside of combat that's just really boring and dull. But I will say that I love the fact that you can customize your ships, and when you add these things like bigger guns or whatever, it actually shows on their models and functions as you'd expect them to in combat. Like, that's really cool too. The last, but not, you know, but again another smaller negative, is the user interface. Like, it's not awful, but it is a bit awkward at times, and sometimes it's kind of hard to manage. Luckily, they give you all the tools you need to understand it in the tutorial, but overall, it still feels a bit weird, as do the controls when you're in combat. For instance, the same button to move your fleet is right-click, but that button is also used for rotating the camera. Then you've got all these other controls to maintain and move the camera, but it's also really awkward. You've got like 4 or 5 different things you can do to move and mess with the camera, and it can get a little overwhelming at times. Plus, you need to click twice to tell them to move. I guess because it's the same button as ordering your ships to move, but overall, it's just a little bit awkward, and it'll take some getting used to. Okay, so that's all I got for the pros and the cons. Obviously, there are more pros than cons here, but gameplay is a big one. The biggest one for me in any game I play. So if it's in the negatives, it doesn't matter how many pros the game has. That still requires special attention. Now, am I saying the game is bad? Absolutely not. The game is perfectly average, which is better than unfortunately average. It was about what I was expecting in some ways, but disappointing in others. It has some good points and it has some bad points. But for $20 and probably at least 20 hours of gameplay, I think it's worth it. If you're even remotely interested in this game, then I'd give it a shot. But if watching this video made you think it might not be for you, then it probably isn't. I'm not going to say everyone needs to try this game, but if you love sci-fi spaceship battles like I do, then you'll probably get a kick out of this game. Long story short, it's not a badly designed or broken game, it's just a little less impressive than the store page would have you believe. That's all. So if you still feel like you want to give it a try, then go ahead. I hope you enjoy it. But if you saw this and thought it wasn't for you, I wouldn't blame you. Alright, everybody? Alright, so that's all the time I got for this video, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I can't wait to see you all again on my next adventure. So until then, I bid you all farewell.